The choices made by George W. Bush and Donald Trump are now killing people. ProPublica is now reporting about the death of a 28-year-old woman in Georgia who died because of what George W. Bush and Donald Trump did to her when they appointed those Supreme Court justices. Amber Nicole Thurman was a healthy 28-year-old medical assistant who was the mother of a 6-year-old boy. And the choices made by George W. Bush and Donald Trump and the Republican Supreme Court justices and Republican politicians in Georgia, using the tools that those Supreme Court justices gave them, killed her. ProPublica reports, in her final hours, Amber Nicole Thurman suffered from a grave infection that her suburban Atlanta hospital was well equipped to treat. She'd taken abortion pills and encountered a rare complication. She had not expelled all of the fetal tissue from her body. She showed up at the Piedmont Henry Hospital in need of a routine procedure to clear it from her uterus called a dilation and curettage, or D&C. But just that summer, her state had made performing the procedure a felony, with few exceptions. George W. Bush, in his silent retirement in Texas, made that routine medical procedure a felony. Donald Trump is proud to noisily take credit for overturning Roe versus Wade and claiming that we all wanted that to happen, and he is pretending that he has no blood on his hands. Donald Trump is pretending that he had nothing to do with making a procedure, a routine medical procedure like a D&C, a felony. Amber Nicole Thurman would be alive tonight if the Supreme Court had not handed the 2000 presidential election to George W. Bush. Without George W. Bush's appointees to the Supreme Court, Amber Nicole Thurman would be alive tonight. She would be a healthy, happy mother of her young son, who was forced by George W. Bush and Donald Trump to attend his mother's funeral at age 6. When I was 6 years old, my mother had the same medical procedure that Amber Nicole Thurman desperately needed to live. My mother had given birth to 5 healthy children, but she kept going. She was trying to have a sister for her only daughter, trying for one more. And she suffered a miscarriage, and she routinely had a D&C at a local hospital in Boston years before abortion was legal, because D&C has absolutely nothing to do with abortion. None of the Catholic nuns teaching me at my elementary school then thought my mother should not have that procedure. Our beloved Monsignor Brandley knew that when mothers in St. Brendan's Parish had miscarriages, the doctors should give them whatever treatment they needed. Anti-abortion Catholic doctors performed that procedure routinely. There wasn't a single Irish Catholic politician in Boston, including the mayor and the district attorney, who ever tried to interfere with that medical procedure. Their sisters were having that procedure. Their daughters were having that procedure routinely in anti-abortion Boston, because it has nothing to do with abortion. Nothing. If a politician interfered with that procedure and killed my mother when I was 6 years old, who's going to tell that boy? Who's going to tell that 6-year-old how his mother died and who is really responsible? The D&C procedure was routine in many areas of the country long before abortion was legal. Outlawing that procedure is sheer madness, criminal madness, murderous madness. Outlawing the D&C procedure is
and it's powerful, as you can see, emotional at times. And he blames the Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. He blames Donald Trump, and he blames George W. Bush. And I agree with John Slade, who says you're going to get more stories like this. It's devastating, because the decisions like this we knew they would hurt women, and we've heard stories where women's health has been put in jeopardy. But we're going to see more women die because doctors, nurses, medical practitioners in states where the laws have changed aren't able to provide care without fear of going to jail. And I'm sure it was torture for them as well. Heather writes, this was literally torture for her, for this young woman who leaves a 6-year-old son behind. I agree with teacher Lori. When you look at who to blame, she writes, MAGA will blame her for taking the pills. They'll blame her for being irresponsible, for not taking steps to not get pregnant. It's horrifying. There is really only one choice for president. There's really only one choice. If this is an issue that matters to you, if women matter to you, there's only one choice. As a matter of fact, yesterday, Vice President Kamala Harris sat down with the National Association of Black Journalists and talked a little bit about abortion and got pretty passionate about the issue as well. I think we have that video too, Albert, right? No, he's making it work. Rain writes, I posted Amber Nicole Thurman's story on my Facebook page and no one responded or made a comment. It's almost too horrifying to talk about, honestly. It's almost too horrifying. I mean, what do you say? What do you say? I don't know. I mean, I'm so emotionally moved by this story. I think I might have problems commenting too. Let's check out what Kamala Harris had to say yesterday.
Over 20 states have passed what I call Trump abortion bans because I understand how we got here. The former president handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. They did as he intended, and in state after state, laws have been passed criminalizing healthcare providers. I don't know if anyone here has heard most recently the stories out of Georgia. Tragic story about a young woman who died because it appears the people who should have given her health care were afraid they'd be criminalized after the Dobbs decision came down. Laws that make no exception even for rape or incest, which means that you're telling a survivor of a crime of a violation to their body that they have no right to make a decision about what happens to their body next, which is immoral. An approach that doesn't take into account that most people, I think, agree you don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. If she chooses, she will talk with her pastor, her priest, her rabbi, her imam, but it should not be the government or Donald Trump telling her what to do about her own body and her life. So that's where I stand. We need to put back in place the protection of Roe v. Wade and put that into law.
And those restrictions that are also in.
We need to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade and let an individual in consultation with her doctor make the decision based on what she can determine, because she's smart enough to know what's in her best interest instead of having her government tell her what to do, especially a bunch of people in these state capitals who think they're in a better position to tell her what to do than she is to know what's in her best interest.
Yes. Yes. And so there is only one choice for president. There is only one choice. If you care about the health of women, and I don't care if you're a man or a woman, if you care about your mothers and your sisters and your daughters, if you just care about women in general, there really is only one choice. Only one choice. Let's bring in John Rothmann. He is a former KGO talk show host. He is a presidential historian. He is a political analyst. And he is my friend. John Rothmann joins the show. Welcome.
Kim, I want to thank you for highlighting that story. It is horrifying. And if ever there were a reason to elect, or rather, should I say, ever a reason to defeat Donald Trump, that's it. And Kamala Harris's eloquent exposition is spot on.
This is an interesting comment from OCB, who writes, Democrats had decades to codify Roe, and they chose to do nothing.
Incorrect. The Supreme Court of the United States made a ruling. The Supreme Court's rulings are not affirmed by Congress. They are the law of the land. Donald Trump said when he became president, as a candidate for president, that he would nominate justices of the court who would rescind Roe v. Wade, and too many people didn't believe he'd do it. Remember the principle of established law, the idea that it was the law. There was no need for congressional action, and that is another reason to defeat a Donald Trump. This erosion of American justice is wrong. And may I say quickly, you and I have talked about the question of in vitro fertilization in the past. And you will recall that when the Dobbs decision came down, I suggested that IVF would be threatened.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say that that is precisely what has happened. And the Republicans in the United States Senate yesterday refused to affirm a woman's right to in vitro fertilization. And House Republicans joined in. That is another reason why the Republican Party has deserted the very principles of the right of a woman to control her own body. And I'd remind you that every Republican president, through Gerald Ford, supported the Equal Rights Amendment, supported a woman's right to choose. And this dramatic turn in the Republican Party, which was affirmed by Ronald Reagan, I hate to say it, and George W. Bush. And I want to point out also that George W. Bush, when it came to stem cell research, is the one who put limits on that. And for those of us who have family members who have Parkinson's, or had Parkinson's, or other illnesses, it's a disgrace. So if you ask me, if you care about individual liberty, if you care about a woman's ability to control her own body, you cannot vote for Donald Trump.
That's interesting because Mars writes, it's unfair to say that if you won't vote for Kamala, you don't support women.
I didn't say that.
No. Mars says it. I'll back it up. I will say it absolutely. I will double down on it, Mars. I will say this, I believe this. You say it's unfair to say that if you won't vote for Kamala, you don't support women. And I disagree. I
disagree as well. I completely agree with you. Donald Trump has pledged to do certain things, and we have to believe him. And the president of the United States, whoever is president, has tremendous power. When Kamala Harris says that she will defend a woman's right to choose, I believe her. By the way, I want to make one other quick comment. I really believe this so strongly. Whenever I hear anybody say you should turn this over to the states, I'm reminded of the Southern Manifesto, issued in 1956, in which Southern senators and congressmen said this is not a decision to be made by the Supreme Court, the question of integration, Brown versus the Board of Education, turn it over to the states. It was as wrong then as it is now. If that had happened, we would still have segregation in this country.
Right.
There are certain issues which are national issues, and the fact that there is no regard for established law. What would you do if Donald Trump decided to overturn Brown versus the Board of Education? This is absurd. And I think we need to address it directly.
I think it is absurd. And I would argue that it seems to me that if we have women that are struggling, we saw the woman in Texas who had to leave her state to get life-saving care. We saw this woman here, this 28-year-old woman who leaves behind a 6-year-old son who's now without a mother because some simple hospital procedure, some simple procedure that could have saved her life wasn't done because of what's happened. If you can see those cases and you know that more are coming, and you say to yourself, you're not going to vote for Kamala because, that's not your problem, then I think that you don't get it. You just don't get it. If you care about women, there's only one choice for president. Period. End of sentence. I'll go to my grave believing it, Mars. So absolutely not.
I agree with you. And I would ask Mars to reconsider the statement that she posted. I think it is incorrect as well.
I think when you look at that Lawrence O'Donnell video from MSNBC that we played a snippet from, it's a really powerful video that statement that he made, and I feel like it took a lot of courage for him to tell his mother's story, his personal story, and to bring his own family history into that. And maybe that's what it takes, because I'm pretty sure almost everyone has a story.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I hope those stories are remembered by Americans when we go to vote on November 5th.
Yeah. Speaking of fertility and women's issues and having babies, you alluded to this with the IVF. The Republicans cared about this so little that they didn't, Trump decided he's not going to instruct JD Vance to go back to the Senate and even vote on this. He went to a campaign rally. That's how little they care about this issue of providing access, making sure that women have access to reproductive care on the other side, even women who are trying to get pregnant. And they've said in the past that they support the right to have IVF or to have access to IVF. So why, during an election cycle where we know voters care about these issues, would they then slam the door on protecting IVF access a second time? Because this is the second time this has happened.
There is a division in the Republican Party. The Republican Party is now opposed to any chance for a woman to control her own body. What the Republican Party has done is a disgrace. It is why they should lose control of the Senate, why they should lose control of the House, and why Republicans should storm back and take their party. This is look. It's sad. It's horrific. But that's not all the Republicans have done. Can you imagine? And I say this: there are the Republicans in the House. There we are. Can you imagine that a former president of the United States on the debate stage would suggest that Haitian immigrants are eating your pets, monkeys, cats, dogs, geese? Can you imagine that?
No, I cannot.
And we know it isn't true.
Yeah.
Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, who is a conservative Republican and a former attorney general of that state, has said it isn't true. The mayor of Springfield, Ohio, who is a Republican, says it isn't true. And yet, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance continue to advocate this absolutely ridiculous untruth. That alone should be enough to disqualify these two from holding national office. It is shocking to me. And I want to say one more thing. Senator Scott asked a question. Is there a plot to assassinate Donald Trump? Now, I wouldn't have believed this, except I heard it with my own ears. And Eric Trump, the president's son, they are trying to kill my father. I listened to this with absolute incredulity. The Republican Party needs to stand up and point out Democrats aren't advocating the assassination of Donald Trump. They never have. There's not a Democrat who would say that. Now, there is a libertarian candidate for president of the United States by the name of Chase Oliver. He is the candidate of the Libertarian Party who said anyone who murders Harris would be an American hero. No one has talked about that kind of disgraceful language. So
That's crazy.
Of course it is. Now, that's the whole point. The Republican Party has gone off the rails. And may I say that when Elon Musk, a great man, a brilliant man, but brilliance doesn't guarantee that you're right. I would remind you, Henry Ford, one of the most brilliant men in America who changed the face of America with his automobile, was an advocate that Jews were the international problem, the world's foremost problem, the international Jew. Didn't take away from his genius, but it certainly discredited him. And Donald Trump is talking about putting Elon Musk in charge of our American economy.
Yeah.
This is nonsense. This is lunacy. And by the way,
you're oh, go ahead. I have other things I want to talk to you about, but yes, go ahead.
I just want to throw this out. On September 11th, who was traveling on Donald Trump's plane? Laura Loomer.
Yeah.
A September 11th denier, a conspiracy theorist. And Donald Trump is still embracing her. what in the world is going on here? And may I say that when you have a former president of the United States publicly say, I hate Taylor Swift. That's what Donald Trump said.
Yeah.
Because she endorsed Kamala Harris. Can you imagine a president of the United States publicly declaring they hate someone?
No.
You know what that means? And by the way, he talks about mass deportation, including from Springfield, Ohio.
Yeah.
The people in Springfield, Ohio, who are Haitians are there legally. And may I say, Florida is now in play in this election
Yeah.
because Florida has a large Haitian community. And do you think they are going to sit back and let this kind of nonsense prevail? So I'm pointing this out because these things are scary, just like the issue you raised at the top of this program. And every American, conservative, liberal, moderate, Democrat, Republican, male, female, should rise up and condemn this. The best thing that can happen to the Republican Party is to lose this election overwhelmingly. And I just want to say, Mitch McConnell made a comment yesterday about some of these moves, particularly on the question of IVF, saying it's ridiculous and shouldn't be pursued.
Well, let's go back to this issue of fertility.
Sure.
Because it has become, when you look at the abortion issue, you look at the IVF issue, and then you look at the whole childless cat lady thing. For some reason, it seems like fertility and what women have decided to do with their bodies, whether that means having kids or not having kids, is now a matter of discussion for Republicans.
Did you hear
yesterday-
Governor Sanders?
Yesterday,
Governor
Sarah Huckabee Sanders has decided to take a poke at Kamala Harris
that she doesn't have children,
not
and
having
in the
kids.
process insulted every step parent in America.
Let me lay out the
tell you, I've known a lot
story.
of step parents.
Because yesterday they're at a town hall in Flint, Michigan, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is sitting down with Donald Trump, takes a swipe at Kamala Harris for not having biological children. She's a stepmom. She's got 2 stepkids, but that's not good enough for Huckabee Sanders, who talks about that she was tearing up as her own daughter got ready for a dance. And her daughter said, "It's okay, Mommy. One day you can be pretty too." And Sanders said, "So my kids keep me humble." And unfortunately, Kamala Harris doesn't have anything to keep her humble. As if having children is the only thing in life that would keep you humble or keep you on track or make you some type of a person worthy of office. It's outrageous.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders is outrageous. But I want to point out to you, she has been consistently opposed to the right of a woman to choose. Something is definitely wrong in the Republican Party. And the Republicans have to cure their own malfeasance. That's all I can say. It cannot come only from those of us who were once Republicans and who are now Democrats. That's me. But it has to come from people who are currently Republicans. It has to come from the grassroots level. And can you imagine what Kamala Harris's stepchildren must be thinking about what Sarah Huckabee Sanders had to say? It's a disgrace.
It really is a disgrace, and it's no one's business whether you have children or whether you don't. It's, how you don't ask a woman whether she's pregnant because you don't know whether she's struggling. You don't know what's going on with that person. You just don't ask because it's not your business. Someone else's fertility or choices about children, not your business ever. But since we're talking about it, let's talk about Kamala Harris, this woman who Sarah Huckabee Sanders says doesn't have any humility because she doesn't have biological children. Yesterday, Vice President Harris called for putting a cap on family child care expenses. She wants to hold costs to 7% of household income. Now, she said the state of affairs in our country is that working people often have to decide whether they're going to be able to work or to afford childcare. This is where she was talking to the National Association of Black Journalists. She said, "My plan is that no family, no working family should have to pay more than 7% of their income on childcare. It's too
Look,
expensive," she said, "for them to be able to work and to do that." This is a woman who allegedly doesn't care about families, doesn't care about children, doesn't have her own biological children, according to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, isn't humble because of it. And she's the one taking steps to help families struggling like this.
yep, you're absolutely right. And that's all the more reason to vote for Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
There are compelling reasons to vote for her. And, you know, I've been on the radio for many years and doing podcasts and interviews. I've always tried to be objective, clear, precise. Some of you who listen to me on KGO for many years know that I was criticized for not being critical enough of Donald Trump, for being too objective. Well, we are now at a turning point in the American saga in which the American people have to have a firm stand against this. And by the way, every time I hear the Republicans say we need to lower the rhetorical excesses, we need to lower everyone's blood pressure. Let me tell you something. I believe in telling the truth. And the truth is that Donald Trump is a threat to America. And that needs to be made clear. You know, Harry Truman once was called "Give Him Hell Harry." And he was asked what he thought about that. And he said, "I'm not giving them hell. I'm just telling the truth and they think it's hell." And that's what we have to do with Donald Trump in this campaign. For the next 48 days, we have to hold his feet to the fire. And we have to expose to good, honorable, decent Americans, conservatives, Trump supporters, what this is. I heard today, by the way, a very interesting report that a group of governors have gotten together to promulgate the approach that when Donald Trump tries to do election denial, if he loses the election,
Right.
that the governors of the states have to stand firmly with the American election process. One of the gravest disservices that Donald Trump has done to America is the idea that our elections are not fair. Now, look, there is some question about the outcome of some elections, 1876, 1960. You can talk about that. But in the end, what do we Americans do? Even if we disagree with a result, we support it. Because what is America famous for? Orderly transitions of power.
Right.
Who is the only president of the United States, and now candidate for president, who is trying to subvert the idea of an orderly transition of power? That is Donald Trump. And that is something else the American people need to repudiate. Look, I just read a book. I told you about this in the break, and I'm going to show it up so people can see it. It's called Unhumans. Got it? Got a clear picture?
Yeah.
And
wrote
the
that?
introduction to this book is by Steve Bannon. And the endorser of this book are J.D. Vance, Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump Jr., General Flynn. When you read this book, you understand they don't care about truth.
No.
Do you know that according to this book, which is endorsed by these people, Joseph R. McCarthy was correct in his anti-communist crusade?
Who wrote
That
the
the
book?
insurrectionists of January 6th are really national heroes? I read this book. Every American should read this book because it exposes the fact that these people are willing to lie. Unhumans. And it says the secret history of communist revolutionaries and how to crush them. By the way, when Donald Trump can accuse Kamala Harris, he calls her Comrade Harris. I've known Kamala for years. She's not a communist. She's never been a communist. It's absolutely ridiculous. But then when Donald Trump calls her a fascist, which he has done repeatedly, it can
Over
easily
and
be
over
pulled up. You
again.
can hear it over and over again.
Yeah.
What nonsense. I know what a fascist is.
Well, what's interesting about that, John, is then Status Post the second apparent assassination attempt on Trump, where the person never fired a weapon but got pretty close to him on the golf course. The rhetoric is, oh well, it's the Democrats' fault. It's Kamala Harris's fault for
And Joe Biden.
and Joe Biden's fault for using violent words and calling them the Republicans fascists. And last night I'm watching tape after tape of Trump calling Kamala Harris fascist and, as all these other horrible things. So when you talk about if you're going to blame someone, then let's spread it equally around here. Because this,
Can I just remind people?
I wouldn't even say equally around. I would say Trump has more violent speech, right?
I just want to remind people, when I was on KGO, there would be people who would call me and say, Donald Trump's a fascist. Every single person who listened to my broadcast knew that I said, no, he's not. I know what a fascist is. Benito Mussolini was a fascist. Adolf Hitler was a fascist. Francisco Franco in Spain was a fascist. We know what fascism is. These are not fascists. And the idea that Donald Trump, in the same breath, could call Kamala Harris Comrade Harris and also call her a fascist show the imprecision and the incorrectness of, well, that's Donald Trump.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.